Sarah Kennett, our wonderful person. Hello.
Afternoon, how are you?
I am great, thank you. And I can hear you loud and clear. We had an
Excellent.
exciting moment earlier where we could not. And
No, definitely. I've never been one you can't hear.
nice. Um, Exams are critical. They are critical. They are, if you think about what they're designed to do, they are designed to uh, segment an entire population of kids across all uh, um, uh, graduations of effort, of intelligence, of adeptness, and create a scale for them. And what we find with neurodivergence is that sometimes there are artificial barriers that just mean that they can't express themselves, and it therefore isn't the expression that it completely fails in providing that um, uh, a representative exam grade, which then means their future is significantly altered. Sometimes recoverably, sometimes not. Right? Like,
Yeah, I think those qualifications open doors. So you're only as good as your last set of exam results or your last set of experience. So if that's going to open that door for you or close that door for you, then that we need to make sure that isn't disadvantaging amazingly wonderful people just because the exam system's not suited to them.
Yeah, and the idea we had the idea that yeah, an exam hall is a low distraction environment, for example. It's just absolute nonsense. Like I remember to this day, like the proctors, the teachers walking up and down, the noise that would make. That, however, they managed to purchase the world's most loudest clock ever. Like it seems to be a constant.
Yeah.
Um, but finding it so hard, and it's cost me. Like I mucked up exams as a result of that. Um, right, you've got a lot to say. I mustn't bite into your time. Um, this is an area of real passion for me, I think, and for every parent going through this stage. But like this is trajectory changing stuff, and is a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I've titled it "No More Revision Battles," but I don't think we can ever say no more. Never. But let's try and help reduce them and be aware as making them as easy as possible for everybody.
Over to you.
Thank you. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of a background about who I am and why I'm sat here with you this afternoon. So I caught the end of the last speaker's presentation just then, and that varied careers made me smile because yes, most definitely, and the large number of hobbies, I was like, okay, I can relate to that. So I started off my career in pharmaceuticals and then moved into publishing, and then realized that I had a real passion for teaching and developing people. So I've been a head of science in 3 different schools, very different contexts, from everything from a developing school that requires improvement up to a private boarding school. I've been teaching for over 20 years, and I set up my tutoring company, Science Cafe, on the back of doing some work with students that seemed to be not achieving their potential, not knowing how to revise in one of the schools I was working in. So I set up a 6-week revision program with some small groups just to help support those students that it was my responsibility as their teacher, as their head of science, to make sure that they got their qualifications. And we saw grades going from E's to C's because students just knew what to revise and how to revise. And that kind of made me come up with Science Cafe. And I called it Science Cafe because of that 1990 movement in France of scientists sharing information with people through, well, everybody through these science cafes. And that's why I wanted it. It's about sharing, it's about working together, and it's about inspiring. So I have ADHD. I will probably talk too fast, and I will definitely use my hands to speak, and all sorts of different things. I've always had it. I've always been different. I only got my diagnosis when I was 49, but a lot of the things that I've put into the system and what I've built is, and this knowledge and understanding has come from me trialing and erroring different things that have worked with my brain. So my values are definitely about inclusion, building confidence, reducing stress, because ADHDers don't work very well with stress. Structure. I crave new things all the time, but I also crave structure, and that was something that resonated with that hobbies. I, constantly wanted to change hobbies, but I also need some structure around making things practical and real world, and caring for the whole family. Just basically trying to give people that support in their families. So traditional revision techniques. Those traditional revision techniques are very passive, where we're reading or highlighting information, and they tend to be long, unstructured sessions. I remember when I was working in a lab and I had to read lots and lots of clinical papers. I could easily put my hair around my hands and fall asleep pretending I was reading a clinical paper, just because I would get fatigue from reading lots and lots of information. So I worked out that short bursts were really useful for me because I was getting that sensory overload. I do also have very noise sensitive, and I'm going to talk about the noise sensitivity in the exam room a bit later on. But it's about making sure that we're not in those busy environments, and we're reducing the amount of memory that we're expected to use. So long, unstructured sessions just don't work for our ADHD brains. And passive strategies, we need to actively use information. So those kind of traditional ways of, copying out notes or highlighting them just really don't work for us. So how can we make it sticky? And I thought I wanted to bring you some really practical ways that we can help support the young people around us. So the first one is successive learning. So this is a really nice thing to do with things like flashcards, so that you can actually have a flashcard where you're showing the student a word and they have to give you the meaning of it. A lot of content in a lot of different courses is relevant to some keywords. I know science can be like learning a whole new language, especially when you're talking about biology. So having that understanding of those keywords then unlocks those questions so that they know what they're talking about. So doing short retrieval tests of 10 flashcards a day on a regular basis is really, really important. I do a lot of audio listening and audio learning. And one of the books that's in my audio at the moment, and I listen to many depending on my mood, is The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And there was a story that was in that this morning that I've brought to this presentation just because it really resonated with what I'm trying to explain. And it's this idea that if we do small things consistently, regularly, then we can make a compound change. So a really good example of this is if I gave you a penny and said every day for 30 days, I am going to double that penny. So on day 2, you have 2 pennies. On day 3, you have 4 pennies, and so on. Eventually, after 30 days, and I worked this out before the session, you will have £10,737,418.24. And so this just demonstrates that idea of small changes done consistently can absolutely really make a difference. So 10 cards a day, 10 keywords, pick 5. check and then put them into a pile. They know that one, they don't know that one. So that one goes back into the redo pile. And then every now and again, you go back through the ones that they do know just to make sure it's still there. So those short retrieval tests done frequently are actually a really, really positive way of having that engagement, but making that revision not a revision session, sit down in front of a book, but making it engaging and interactive. Again, micro sessions, the Pomodoro technique, the timers, having that timer on, making sure that they are short sessions. I'm terrible for hyper-focused sessions and can sit down at this desk for hours and hours on end. And I'm really trying to be more strict with myself of I've got a task, 20 minutes, and then go do something else. But if they're doing revision, then something maybe like them closing the book and going, what do I remember? What did I get from that 15 minutes? Or just talking to it to somebody else, like that voice note that's on the screen. I use audio a lot. Even as a child, I would record all of my notes onto my Sony Walkman. There are other Walkmans available. And I would listen back to them just because that was a way of me multitasking, a way of me having that interaction, dual task going on just to keep my many different tracks open. So you may want to listen to something and then say it back and then see if you can write it down. It's using it in lots of different ways. And we used to talk a lot about visual, auditory and kinesthetic learners. And I don't believe anybody's one type of learning profile. I think we have different learning profiles for different pieces of information, and we need to use them and experience them in lots of different ways. And the research shows that generally we need to use information 7 or 8 times before we start to build those neuropathic pathways. So in order to make revision work, we need to experience that information in lots of different forums and ways and applications. So doing these kind of micro sessions on a regular basis is going to make it much more sticky, for want of a better word. So that low stimulus setup, we've talked a lot about distractions. Henry talked about distractions in that exam room. Having a decluttered desk. I wish I could show you my desk because it's really not decluttered. But that's because I've been preparing for this. But one-page packets, so splitting things down into small topics and going, right, I am going to learn how to do this, and making sure that you've got some kind of checking in that you know it. Maybe drawing a diagram, maybe doing some multiple choice questions. The previous speaker mentioned body doubling. I use body doubling a lot. I've actually started using, and I'm going to come on to the use of AI in a little bit, but I've started using body doubling with AI, and I'm also an ADHD coach, and I do some body doubling with some of my ADHD clients as well, even just through WhatsApp. But then it's also about motivation. Having those rewards, that dopamine response, that dopamine feedback, and Henry was talking about using eBay and making sure I do have a real shopping penchant and trying to stop that dopamine searching from shopping. But we need to have tiny wins, that visible progress, the small rewards, even if it's a sticker. Even I will tell you now, after working all of these years in secondary schools, I have seen students fight over a sticker. So even at 15, so if they say they don't like stickers, they're lying. They do. They really do. They just like to be told that they are doing the right thing. So here's an example recipe for an ADHD revision session. So setting up the scene, setting that environment so that we get everything ready, the flashcards, what they're going to learn, that one-page packet, for that session, and set a timer. So that there's that cue to the brain, this is what we're going to do, this is how long we're going to do it for. And it stops that time blindness and lowers the stress. Okay, and it stops the stress about starting it, because one of the things as ADHD is we find it really difficult to get started, that motivation of where do I start? What do I do? So that's a really key thing, to have that set up so that this is what you're going to do. A 10-minute retrieval section, so 5 questions, doing some flashcards, writing or saying the answers. So retrieval practice is all about strengthening memory. So it's looking at the information on a regular basis throughout time. So 1 day, 3 days, 7 days apart, so that you are constantly going back to that information, so that it's not overwhelming in our brains. Night before cramming doesn't work. We know this. We need to make things doable and allow that focus. And then we have a look at a 5-minute fix errors. So we're looking at what's going, what do they know, what don't they know? And I always say to my students, I don't expect perfection. The exam board doesn't expect perfection. We are so focused on, did I get everything right, that we're not actually focused on the learning. We're not focused on what didn't I get right, so that I can fix that. And I think we need to rework that into, what do I need to fix? Okay, so I know all of this, I don't know this, so I'm going to focus on this. But we tend to start with the things that we feel comfortable with, because that's where we feel confident. And we don't feel confident here, so we don't start here. So we need to take some time to work on those things that need the fixing. But that's where the learning is. I heard a great analogy of Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison, the guy who invented the light bulb, he came up with 145 plus different ways that the light bulb didn't work. And he didn't think of them as failures. He just thought of it as 145 ways that he now knows is not going to make the light bulb. So I like that idea that we're explaining to the students that we don't expect perfection, and learning isn't first time. You don't have to get it the first time it's told to you or explained to you. And very often in schools, it can be quite a quick, you're going to have a lesson on this topic, and then we're going to move on to the next topic, next lesson. And they kind of think, well, I didn't quite get that one. I don't understand that concept. So it's about them revisiting it on a regular basis outside of home, but not making it this huge battle so that it's going on for hours. So a 3-minute exit ticket, just them going through verbally the key things that they can remember. Saying it out loud is a good way to activate both that auditory and the speaking recognition, because they've got to formulate those sentences as well, which is really, really works. And this creates this repeatable micro routine that parents can supervise really easily. So I've mentioned schools. I've obviously worked in many different schools, and I thought I'd just bring to you some information about why our standard class sizes are around 30. In military contexts, a platoon is typically 28 to 32 people. And it's often quoted as the maximum number a leader can potentially and personally know and manage. So we kind of tend to have these classes of 30, but they don't necessarily have the great advantages for an ADHD or neurodivergent brain. They can help with peer modelling, social energy, routine, and teacher-led learning, such as demonstrations and things like that. But then we can get lost in that classroom. There's too much noise, there's a pace mismatch, that not quite getting something, you may not get the feedback that you need. And there's lots of evidence, and I've put the references throughout the PowerPoint of the references that I've used for this PowerPoint, that we do need smaller classes or breaking into smaller groups to allow a more responsive management and to allow quicker feedback and stronger relationships. So we are looking at sort of the bridging these online remote models. I don't know if anybody's seen, there's a new online remote learning been set up in Australia, which is helping with those smaller groups, and these can help with well-being. That virtual school Victoria is the one that I've quoted there. Okay, on to AI. AI is scaffolding. So I've used AI within the course that I've set up. I've created a Sarah Science bot so that students can access a tutor that they can ask questions of. So they can use AI as a scaffold within the online system that's created. I would use AI in many different ways within my lessons, within my teaching. I may use it to generate questions, to turn notes into quick questions. So I use Cam Scanner a lot. There's lots of apps available that you can scan notes into PDF, and then you can put it into ChatGPT and you can say, generate some multiple choice questions. And then you can get the answer key, and you can use those as parents or teachers to help support that learning. You can get it to prompt for planning, so you can get it to plan those micro sessions. You can get it to plan sessions that are specific for students' desires and needs. So I have a student I'm working with at the moment who really likes the rapper Bugsy Malone, and he has a lot of key messages about being resilient and working hard. So I've started to use AI to help me bring those, because I don't know the lyrics of the rapper Bugsy Malone, but I can use AI to help me bring that into maybe my PSHE lessons with this gentleman, or with the English lesson, so we can analyze his language and the purpose and the intent behind it. So AI doesn't replace teaching. We're not going to get it to write our homework for us, but we're going to use it as a scaffold, not a shortcut. So generating materials, simplifying, personalizing, and freeing up time. But you need to make sure that you keep the accuracy. So one of the things I do is I cut and paste the section from the exam board spec so that I can say to the AI, make sure that it's this. And that's the bit that I've done the training with my AI Sarah Science bot. So I figured that there may be a wide variety of different age groups, parents listening here. So thinking about primary versus secondary age groups. So for primary, for those key stage 2, we need to be doing things in shorter bursts, maybe with picture retrievals, snap, true false games, and that environment is proportionally more impactful. With secondary, we may want to have interleaving, that synoptic learning, particularly. Obviously, I'm going to talk about science more and more because that's my specialist subject, but there's a lot of overlap between those subjects and how they interweave together. So showing students that biology, chemistry and physics are not just 3 distinct separate bubbles. And likewise from English into science, one of the things that the students at secondary school are taught in English is that point evidence explanation, and then they don't seem to apply that in their science 3-4 marker answers. So it's about showing them that those skills that they're learning in one subject are actually relevant and real to another subject. They may need to look at exam specific scripting, so what the command words mean, planning their answers with bullet points. In a lot of science exams, there's longer mark written answers, some of them up to 6 marks with different exam boards. So they may need to be able to plan their answer, and that's where those English skills that they're learning in those English lessons can then be used within their other topics and other subjects. So primary, keep it short, concrete, playful. Secondary, structured, short sprints, and student independence with that support tools. So allow them to choose the topic that they want to do. I can offer, if there's any teachers here that would like any extra support, there are some resources that I've prepared, and you can see the websites on the bottom of all of the slides. There's just some help there. A lot of our work is now very much ADHD informed, but I think we still need to keep that conversation going and thinking about how we can best support. So there's a pack of resources there for teachers, and if anybody would like any kind of CPD within a school environment, just get in touch, because I think it's really important that we start talking with parents about how they can support their children at home, because I think often they're not that confident about how they can help, and maybe students don't always want to talk to their parents about their learning, especially when they get to 15. I've worked with all sorts of different top scientist children, just because it's not because they don't know the content, it's just because it helps another person doing it. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier was about rewards, making that progress visible. And I talked about stickers being useful, and having that reward for knowing or being able to do things. So having streaks, so how many days can they do in a row? Because ADHD brains have a lower baseline dopamine and a less efficient reward pathway. So especially if that reward feels far away, one of the things that I was talking about with the Slight Edge book is about being able to look so far into the distance, saving to £250 a month from the age of 20 up until the age of 60, you'll be a millionaire by the time you reach 60 plus. And it's kind of that, we can't see that far into the future. That reward is 40 years away. That's just too far. So motivation with ADHD students isn't just about getting them to try harder. So we need clear, immediate and meaningful rewards to keep that focus. So experience points, different levels of difficulty of questions. If you look at any of the assessment objectives within any of the exam board specs for any subject, you will see that there are different levels of questions that recall, state, describe, explain, evaluate. There's a difference in difficulty of those questions. So you could have different points for different types of questions. As I said, streaks, how many days can they do in a row? But it's about making them clear and attainable. And if a streak breaks, it's a reset compassionately. So don't punish don't doing it. Just say, let's pick ourselves up, just like that baby learning to walk. They fall down on their bum and you get back up and they do it again until they can walk consistently. And it's about kind of saying to them, right, okay, we didn't do it today, do it tomorrow. So these elements provide frequent dopamine hits for incremental progress, not just that final result. Give them some of that choice and autonomy so that they can maybe choose what reward they'll earn. as a teacher, I've with difficult or students that have found motivation difficult, I've often done rewards of magazines or things that interest them for their hobbies. I did a reward with one of my tutoring students last year of a Stanley Cup, and when she got her exam results in August, I made sure I sent it to her, because she needed to know that reward was there, because she worked hard from a student that couldn't sit in an exam hall and wouldn't even write her name on an exam paper in year 9, to leaving with grade 6s in year 11, was just a phenomenal growth in her confidence and ability to engage with the subject that she was really disaffected with. Accountability ladders, so looking at a daily check-ins. I like to think of these, and going back to that compound effect of doing things on a regular basis daily. Okay, so the evidence shows that motivational gains are positive but mixed. So we need to use meaningful games. We need to give feedback that's going to help students to progress. So these gamified structures don't need to be infantilized. A lot of the computer games can be quite cartoony and maybe feel a little bit primary schooly. So we need things that provide real progress, real feedback, and drive that dopamine pathway. So Henry, at the start of the session, spoke about the exam hall, and large drafty halls with rows of desks can create a massive sensory overload, even for a neurotypical student. If you are like me and noise sensitive, the environment would magnify that stress. Every pen scratch, every cough or chair scrape becomes a massive distraction. So this is a massive built-in disadvantage that isn't about that ability or effort that we were talking about at the very beginning. And I'm a massive fan of being able to use on-screen exams so that they can be done in small, comfortable environments. There's obviously huge challenges and limitations of these, but a lot of the exam boards are looking into these. So AQA are piloting digital exams for some subjects from 2027, so not too far away. Obviously, that's approval pending. Pearson aims to offer on-screen options by 2030. But there's some implications for that, because people need to be able to type. So we need that keyboard fluency. When I was at school, we learned to type on electric typewriters. I'm definitely showing my age there. But they need to be able to read on screen, have split screen reading. I think we're getting better at that now, with using a lot more technology like we're using today to communicate across the world. So we need to be prepared now. We need to have typing warm-ups, on-screen practice, keyboard shortcuts, and lots of mock digital items. So we've got some real leading work within Australia, looking at virtual schools and mentoring programs for virtual learners, which show scalable models that we can look to in the UK to actually help with our neurodivergent ADHD learners. And so digital exams aren't just a technical upgrade. They're a chance to level the playing field. And that's what it's really all about. It's about not having that stop the clock in your 11 plus exam, because as Henry said at the start, how on earth are we going to know that we've actually lost focus? But we need to make sure that we're building that keyboard fluency and navigation fluency right now. So I thought I would just give you a couple of case studies, and I've mentioned a couple of students whilst I've been talking. There's just a few case studies here of some students that I've worked with, and these are based on not just learning science, but also that coaching side of things, and working with them as to how we can help develop some techniques that work for them outside of being sat with me. So one of the ones, year 11, he was ADHD with the inattentive type. I couldn't start. So didn't know where to start. Where do I start? Where do I start writing? So we started with lots of structure, sentence structures, scaffolding. And I would give short tasks, retrieval tasks on a daily basis that mum and dad could then work with the student on, so that they could then see that progress with them. And they were going to from 28 to 64% correct on mixed science questions, and reducing their anxiety, because they were then feeling that they can do science. And I'm often saying a lot of my work is based on confidence, is based on showing the students that they can learn it. It's just about a constant application to that, and taking the time to get underneath it. So case study B, this was a year 8 student who was hyperactive ADHD, high energy, constant interruptions, would be very, very distracted within the sessions. So we used a lot of diagram drawing or diagram labeling. We had a gamification streak, so we had parents would track how many times they'd done the tasks that I'd set them throughout the week, those micro sessions. And we can start to see that retrieval increasing from 2 out of 10 to 7 out of 10 in those 3 weeks, just by those micro sessions, that compound effect building on previous learning. And then this year 6, who was having nerves about going up into secondary school, that, you know, fitting in with a whole new group, and time blindness, that whole idea of, you know, how long things take us to do. I was saying to Henry when we were talking about this, I've got horses, and I can easily go and spend 2 hours down in the barn with the horses, having told my husband I'd be there for 10 minutes. So time blindness, I think, is a real common factor that we need to take into account, and that's where timers can help us, and that awareness of keeping things short. So visual schedules, particularly for that primary school age, maybe having that Friday, I call it the boss fight quiz, but actually having a quiz on a Friday in the evening with mum or dad, and making sure that they, you know, they've got that reward then for achieving whatever that achievement looks like. It doesn't have to be a score, it could be effort. Don't always think that we have to be rewarding correct answers or that percentage correct, and it kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier. We need to reward the learning. Did they remember something on that Friday that they didn't remember the previous Friday? Yeah. So why things like this can help. Less overwhelm. There is less kind of, I've got this mountain to climb, I can't start. There's more retention. We get parental involvement, and parents know how they can help support the students, which is really important, because, as I said, very often the students don't want the parents' help, but if there's maybe a point to it, they can, and a purpose, they can see that. Frequent dopamine hits for that motivation. And if we make these low stimulus adjustments, then we can free up that working memory as well. We can use progress, and that's easy for everybody to track, so that we can get those measurable gains. But those measurable gains, that's that old analogy of Rome wasn't built in a day, that we are putting one foot in front of the other each day to make that step towards it. And this is why I think if we have ADHD students, we should be thinking about revision way before Christmas, and starting now on a daily, regular basis, and building it in as part of their daily practice. So I mentioned audio revision. So that the program that I have, as well as my science bot, is this audio revision with the structure of saying, this week you're going to revise these 4 micro topics or these 5 micro topics, and here's how to revise it. You're going to do a flashcard on that topic. You're going to draw that diagram, which then really helps the students know exactly what success looks like. And then they've got the audio revision, so they can listen to these less than 10-minute short audio, and do that whilst walking the dog or walking to school, because we've all got earpods in or headphones in all the time now. So maybe actually then saying, I've revised this morning whilst walking to school, means that it then doesn't feel like this big challenge or big task to get them to sit down. So you can access the presentation and handouts by going to that page, and just if you put your email address in, I will email them over to you, along with all the packs that I've put together. If you'd like any more information about anything that I can help you with, and don't feel that has to be paid for, please just get in touch. I would welcome supporting anybody, giving people ideas. Even if you just want, how best can I use AI to help me get structure, please do get in touch. I'm really personable and really friendly, and I don't bite, I promise. And as I promised, there are the references at the end there, so that you can access any of the references that are within the PowerPoint there. So I think now's a good time to see if there's any questions about everything I've said this evening.
Many questions. Anyway, don't send the day away like we're still afternoon.
Oh yeah, sorry.
This is running. We're running for 24 hours. Well, 28 hours. Like we have to be tight on this time name. No, we've had lots of questions and a lot of interesting comments. I enjoyed that enormously. I think it really talked to the specificity of how different we are, and that we just need the rules, the guidance that is created for everyone else just isn't necessarily a fit for us. And that sort of well, to be honest, what came through was more than that, which is like, obviously within the neurodivergent community we're quite different, and when you gave those examples of, this is what I did with this kid, this is what I did with this kid, and you can see why it would work and why it was so impactful. And I think it's brilliant. Now, we've talked before about AI, and AI within the classroom is, I mean, it's like you're talking about the devil. Like it's people get excited, and yet we're seeing, as you pointed out, really amazing uses of AI. And I've certainly talked to a parent who, with their child talking particularly around memorization, I think we talked about this, that they'd used AI to create a mnemonic. They were struggling to remember something. For me, memory is a massive issue. And I remember making mnemonics. I won't tell you the mnemonic I have for remembering exactly how the months go, which I have to use to this day, but I can tell you it's very rude. Like it,
but the rude ones they remember even more. I encourage rude mnemonics.
Anyway, in a more child-friendly focused one, so she asked her AI for a mnemonic, and it was decent, but fundamentally not memorable. You talked about a student being really into a rapper. In this case, this kid's really into Grey's Anatomy. So they said, can you give me a mnemonic based on Grey's Anatomy? And suddenly, in instant, you've got a mnemonic that actually works, that is memorable. And the use of AI for that kind of thing is spectacular. It and I thought where you talked about using the prompt as a tutor, I have to say, like, it's what I do these days. Like, I'm trying to use it to try and work through things. I think there's another use of the prompt which is interesting, which is, you know, the inertia that many with ADHD, myself included, like getting started. But actually starting the prompt is a really low way to get into it. And so I think you were talking about using the prompt, say, to create flashcards. I suppose where I'd started to think about was sometimes the making of the revision items is the revision. So
Yeah.
making flashcards, putting diagrams and squiggling things in is actually the learning. Like, and
Yeah,
that's
agree
what I want to
completely.
ask you about that.
But then having them pre-made and then writing them out onto a hard flashcard, so you can get AI to say put together 20 flashcards for this set of notes, and it will pull out the keywords and make the flashcards based on that student's set of notes. And there's a massive advantage to that as well, because obviously we lose things as ADHDers. So actually scanning the notes and having them as an electronic file, it may be a good thing for a parent to have anyway. For, you know, if they've got a year 10 book, I would highly recommend, you know, having those electronic resources and repositories of those books, so that you've got those notes to go back to. But then actually then writing them out and putting their own diagrams and their own extra information around that, making their own mnemonics that go with that flashcard, as you say, is part of that learning. And then that interaction of using those flashcards in those short spaces on a daily basis is where that retrieval practice and that spaced learning comes in, to keep it going throughout time and get those neuropathic pathways built.
It goes to what you've shown with your examples, which is the difference amongst kids means you need to think, like, for this kid, actually making all the diagrams, that's going to be incredible revision and it'll really capture them. This kid will, you know, we should print out the flashcards and go through them on a regular basis, and going like a lot of times a little. I thought your points on dopamine. Go on.
Or the other thing is using multiple choice questions. You know, if you've got a student that doesn't like writing at all, then multiple choice questions are a great way of giving them. They know the answers there. They then just need to decipher and decode which one is the correct one.
I agree. I've done some American exams, so which were all multiple choice, very sophisticated. So the question, if you got it right, the next question was harder, and kept getting harder until it gets sort of a wiggle where you're getting them right and wrong, and it evaluates you that way. It does make me when we're talking about looking to get our exams on in 5 years' time, getting them electronic. I mean, the disparity now, like, I mean, I can tell you, like, as an adult, number of essays written with a pen, very, very low. like, I don't do that. Like, and whereas typing large, long things all the time. So the idea that our exams should be handwritten is a bit weird. Like,
And as an
I've had
examiner,
resistance in my own opinion.
as an examiner, there's a lot of students out there with very difficult to read handwriting.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, like, the other thing you see with online exams on computers is it actually is much easier to have separate rooms, put people in more individualized settings, and some of these issues of these massive halls or very difficult exam halls. We had a very odd battle with involving Cambridge University. So we had a GP, a Cambridge GP, took it upon themselves to write to the Times and say, like, too many Cambridge students were getting an ADHD diagnosis, and they were doing it so that they could get out of taking their exams in the main exam hall, which is, I think, a 16th century glorious thing. And the idea that the 16th century hall is an important qualifier for your future career livelihood, I thought it was such an odd thing to get upset about, and I just thought it extraordinary. We worked with some PhD students there to work up a response, and our response was that Cambridge University has been the home to an extraordinary diversity of minds over centuries, and the fact that they're doing work to expand that diversity should be celebrated.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we're out of time, which is very sad. Okay, are you up for a rapid fire round?
Yeah.
I've got a few questions.
No,
But
go.
you like, this is, I don't know what this is flashcard version. Okay, so you've just got to give the summary answer very fast.
Okay.
Okay, why doesn't my child's revision stick when they're highlighting their notes?
Because they're not doing anything active with it. We need to do something active with it, not just highlight it. I wanted to do an activity with everybody, and maybe you could try this at home. Get a piece of text, highlight the key points, go away, see how much you remember in 20 minutes, and then actually do something active with it. Write 5 multiple choice questions about it, and then see how much you remember. If you do something active with it, you'll remember more.
Yeah, you got to move it around in your brain.
Yeah.
Like, it's great, push it down some neurons. How long should my kid revise?
I would recommend short daily bursts of 10, 15 minutes are much more effective than saying to them, revise for 2 hours straight.
Okay, I want to challenge that genuinely. So I see that, but also I know about hyperfocus.
Yes. Yeah. And it depends on how much they're interested in the topic. So I'm talking about the student who says, I don't need science, I don't want science, but it actually explains the world around us. So if you've got a student that is not hyper focused on that topic, then the short daily bursts can work. But if they're uber interested in it, then let them do as much as they feel is appropriate for them.
Why do traditional whole class revision sessions struggle for ADHD learners?
Too much noise, too much sensory overload, not at the right pace, doesn't explain everything that they need. They get lost in the crowd.
Yeah, and then shock, the same thing happens in the exam hall.
Yeah.
From social, I'm currently doing an apprenticeship, granted, not a young student anymore. But we all run our own race, and as ADHD is it's usually been tough, and I think you should celebrate that you got there to get to that point. And but I love doing flashcards. I just get stuck on making them. What advice do you have to them?
Oh, stuck on making them. Stuck where to start, or stuck how to write them? Then use AI. If you're stuck where to start, put your notes into AI and say, make me 30 flashcards, or make me flashcards on this set of notes, and then use those flashcards and just keep, have the word on one side, the definition on the other, or whatever you're trying to memorize, and just keep reading them and going back to them on a regular basis. Even if you're an older learner like me, I'm still learning all the time. I said I'm listening to audiobooks all the time and making sure, so I'm constantly learning. I love learning because that's what keeps me awake. If you're stuck where to start, I would definitely use those AI resources to help you.
And I think that tells the underlying thing, which is think about what's the block, what's the thing that's stopping you, and just target that. And if there's it's in politics, That's actually how this topic was introduced to me. In politics, when we're trying to get a change happen, they say look at the block analysis. What are the blocks to what you want to happen, and break them away. And I think it's exactly the same for if we're struggling to do something. What's the block? It might be an emotional block. It might be it could be multiple things, but go and nail that. And I think you talked about that, saying like if the blocks getting started, then AI is your friend. Someone put in the chat talking about, I think it was LM, Google LM, Notebook LM, sorry, and that it's a study aid that you put all your notes into and it can create flashcards for you.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
that's an example of something.
Yeah, I use Quizlet. There's lots of great resources out there that do those kind of things, and you can just put your notes in.
Thank you, Sarah. You've been amazing.
Thank you.
I found that genuinely hugely informative, and there's going to be some improved exam grades in the summer, no doubt, as a result of this. So, thank you, and well, and as a result of all your work. So, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I have to bid you adieu. So, thank you very much. Bye bye.
Take care.